Taking a photograph of a male Darwin's frog slurping up his eggs or tadpoles is extremely hard to do. The frog does the job quickly and secretively. This illustration is based on a drawing made by biologist Klaus Busse from his video recordings of the frogs in action. A male Darwin's frog watches over his eggs. Females lay up to 15 eggs in a clutch. The eggs are about 3.6 millimeters wide, 0.14 inches, more than twice the size of most other frog eggs. Male Darwin frogs either slurp the eggs into their mouths just before they hatch, or they gobble up the tadpoles right after they hatch. These tiny baby Darwin frogs have just hopped out of their father's mouth. About 90% of all frog species abandon their young. In most of the other 10%, the females take care of the young. In only a few species, such as the Darwin frogs, it's the male. The tadpoles grow and develop inside their fathers for about 2 months. Eventually, tiny frogs crawl from their vocal sac into their father's mouth. He opens wide and the babies hop out. No other frog burps up its young. But tadpoles need food to develop into frogs. What do they eat inside their father's vocal sac? Tadpoles of Darwin's frogs hatch with large amounts of yolk. For a while, they get food by absorbing this yolk into their bodies. But this may only be part of their nourishment. In the 1970s, 3 scientists from Valdivia, Chile, studied the vocal sacs of Darwin's frogs. Oscar Gociega, Orlando Garrido, and Boris Joquera found signs that the inside lining of the vocal sac releases substances. They wondered, do tadpoles eat these substances? The scientists carried out an experiment to answer this question. Based on their results, it seems likely that substances released from the vocal sac pass through the skin of the young tadpoles and into the intestine of older ones. Is that how tadpoles get enough nourishment to develop into frogs? If so, Darwin's frogs are the only frogs in which males feed their tadpoles. The vocal sac of male Darwin frogs become greatly enlarged when he broods or carries his tadpoles. During this time, he does not call, but he does eat. The tadpoles of this brooding male look like sardines packed into a can. The next part of the story is an example of serendipity, making discoveries by chance. When he was a student in Chile, Klaus Busse studied how gray wood frogs reproduce. Later in Germany, he studied birds. After that, he started working with fish at the Museum Koenig in Bonn, Germany. His research has come full circle, and he is now the world's expert on Darwin's frogs. As a child, Busse spent summers with his cousins near Valdivia, Chile, where they explored a nearby forest he once described as magical. Busse was especially enchanted with the little pointy-nosed Darwin frogs. In the 1980s, when he returned to Germany after a trip to Chile, He took some Darwin frogs with him. He thought, they will remind me of my magical forest, the smell of wet trees, and the raindrops on my face. Back at the museum, Boosie set up the frogs in and outdoor terraria. These frog apartments provided hiding places for the frogs and running water that flowed over moss. Boosie spent many hours watching the frogs. He wondered what he would learn. His work required patience. He hesitated to leave the terraria even for a minute, for fear of missing something. Thanks to his patience, Boosie often observed the frog's courtship behavior. Courtship starts when a male calls peep, 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 like a baby duck. If a female is ready to lay her eggs, she hops towards the male. Then the frogs do something unusual. Klaus Boosie's terraria for watching frogs are kept outdoors at the Museum Koenig in Bonn, Germany. These Darwin frogs are mostly ready to lay and fertilize eggs. The female is the green and brown frog. They engage in what Boosie calls jump onto kick-off behavior. Bam! The male bumps into the female. Wham! She kicks him with her back legs. He loses his balance, tumbles away, picks himself up, and crashes into her again. Bam! She delivers another powerful kick. When Boosie first saw this behavior, he gasps, "Are the frogs crazy? Am I crazy? Frogs don't do this." The next day, Boosie sat in front of the terrarium with his video camera. The frogs bumped, kicked, and tumbled. He now had proof that he wasn't imagining the odd behavior. Boosie thinks the female might use this behavior to choose a mate. Males must be strong to brood tadpoles for 2 months. Perhaps a female can gauge a male's stamina by how far he tumbles when he kicks him. If he tumbles too far, he might be weak, and he might not make such a good father. If he moves only a little, he might be strong and a terrific protector. If the female is satisfied with how a male reacts, she follows him into his hiding place. She lays her eggs under a piece of wood or stone. Her baby's fate will soon be in her mate's hands, vocal sac. After the female lays her eggs, 10 to 11 weeks pass before the baby frogs emerge from the father's mouth. These illustrations are based on drawings made by biologist Klaus Boosie from his video recordings of Darwin frogs in action. They jump into kick-off behavior. The larger female is lifting her back leg and kicking the smaller male after he bumps into her. A Darwin frog emerges for its first view of the world. It will soon hop to the ground and be on its own. Melimuyu, home to many Darwin's frogs, is almost as far south as the frogs live. In the 1990s, I too became involved in the story of Darwin's frog. I had read about the frogs years before when I was a young herpetologist, and I could hardly believe their story. Over the years, I studied many frogs in Costa Rica, Brazil, Ecuador, and Argentina. Finally, in 1994, I visited Chile and fulfilled my dream of seeing Darwin's frogs. I realized that scientists still didn't know much about Darwin's frogs' lives in the wild. I decided to visit the frogs' native habitats to learn what I could. Lauren, my 17-year-old niece, volunteered to be my field assistant. In November 1999, we traveled almost to the bottom of the world. to Melimoyu in southern Chile. At the time, Melimoyu was an isolated fishing village with 25 people and hundreds of Darwin's frogs. Lauren and I stayed with a family in a small wooden cottage for more than 2 weeks. The cottage had no electricity, indoor toilets, or beds, but we ate like queens, freshly caught fish and clams, and bread baked in a wood stove. Our first day in Melanmoyu, or one of our explorations, on one of our explorations, Lauren giggled. Aunt Marty, I just found the Pillsbury Doughboy. It was the chubbiest, roly-poly brooding male I've ever seen. I was curious about the behavior of brooding males. I figured they would make especially good meals for predators. Adult frogs with tadpole centers. I wondered, do brooding males hide to avoid being eaten? Do they hang out in different places than females and non-brooding males do? Left sunrise near Melanmoyu, below, a male Darwin frog with his vocal sac full of young. Every day, Lauren and I bundled up in long underwear, down jackets, and heavy-duty rain gear to watch frogs. We struggled to keep warm and dry. Since warmer temperatures allow tadpoles to develop faster, I wondered if brooding males sought warmer areas to brood. Using a digital thermometer, we measured the temperature of the exact spot where we found each frog on the surface of dirt, fallen leaves, or moss. We found that, compared with other adults, brooding males hung out in warmer areas, just as you would get warmer in direct sunlight. Brooding males heat their bodies in warm spots, and their tadpoles can develop faster. We thought the brooding males might become less active to avoid being eaten. Maybe they would hide. So we also recorded the activities of frogs during 20-minute blocks of time. Lauren and I found that brooding males were just as active as non-brooding males and females. Despite their precious cargo, brooding males still needed to search for their insect dinners. So how do Darwin frogs protect themselves from predators? Above left, Lauren watches a Darwin frog through binoculars to study their frogs' activity levels. We observed each frog for 20 minutes and wrote down the number of times it hopped. Above right, we marked the location of each Darwin frog and flagging tape. Darwin's frogs stay in their home areas, so by marking the sites, we knew where to look for each frog. Left, after measuring each Darwin frog, we put it in the exact place where we found it. Who's afraid of the chucayo? In southern Chile, there is a superstition that if a chucayo sings over your left shoulder, you should return home and quit work for the day. If you don't obey the warning, something bad might happen to you. There is a way to appease the chucayo, though. Quickly say out loud, El canto para mí, las lombrices para ti. The song for me, the worms for you. The chucayo will then allow you to continue safely on your way. The chucayo eats Darwin's frogs. The bird is about 16.5 centimeters, 6.5 inches long. It's probably what I would be there for, looking for that. When Darwin's frogs sit still, they are hard to see. They are about the same size, color, and shape of southern beech tree leaves, which are often the most common tree in the frog's habitat. In fact, a frog's pointed nose looks like a leaf petiole, the stalk that connects a leaf blade to the stem. A frog stays camouflaged by looking like a leaf on the ground, but when they move, the frogs attract the attention of predators. For example, the frog makes tasty meals for the chukau, a brown bird with an orange chest and a black and white striped belly. Chukous hop along the forest floor. Like chickens, they scrape the ground with their feet, tossing dirt and leaves behind them as they search for food. If a frog happens to jump to avoid being crushed by a chukow's foot, the bird might grab the frog in its bill. So what's a Darwin frog to do? When disturbed, the frogs sometimes flip onto their backs and play dead. Because most predators don't eat dead frogs, a flipped over frog has a better chance of surviving. As I tried to photograph this Darwin's frog, it flipped over and played dead. Maybe it thought I was going to eat it. Darwin's frogs blend with their environment. They look like these southern beech tree leaves that have fallen to the ground. A part of the native forest was cut down to this plant stand of non-native eucalyptus trees in Chile. Perhaps the biggest Darwin's frog mystery so far is the 21st century is why the frogs are disappearing. Scientists wonder where the frogs still live and which places once had Darwin frogs, but now show no sign of them. In some places, the frog's disappearance is easy to understand. People have cut down native forest and planted pine and eucalyptus trees for lumber and firewood. Darwin's frogs cannot live in pine or eucalyptus plantations. The changes in moisture and ground cover and new populations of insects now available for food are not right for them. But the frogs also have disappeared from protected habitats. What is the reason? Darwin's frog is only one of many species of frogs that are declining in protected areas in the world. Another is the golden toad, shown here, once found only in one mountain range in Costa Rica. The last golden toad was seen in 1989. Like Darwin's frog, the tree frog known as Gastrotheca cornuta is also declining in numbers. The author swabs a frog for BD. Let's find what that means. A killer fungus is likely a possibility. In the late 1990s, scientists discovered a fungus that attacks and kills some species of amphibians, but not others. They named it Batacorchitrium gendrobatidis, or BD for short. Feel free to look up that pronunciation yourself. The fungus occurs in some areas, but not in others. Has the fungus attacked Darwin's frogs? And if so, in which parts of the frog's range? I am working with two other conservation biologists, Dante Fenelio and Andres Charrier, to answer these questions. So far, we've surveyed 12 sites from central to southern Chile. We search for frogs in moss and layers of fallen leaves. We wipe a sterile cotton swab over each frog's belly and legs. Then we put the swab in its own sterile container. Later, laboratory technicians examine the swabs to see if BD is present. The good news is that of August 2012, BD was present on frogs from only one of our study sites. But what happened to Darwin's frogs that have disappeared from other protected sites? Could BD have killed them? Dante Fenolio from the Atlanta Botanical Garden, cleaning his boots. After we leave a site, we soak our boots in bleach to kill any fungi that might be present. We do not want to carry the fatal BD fungus from one place to another. Andres Charrier from the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile in Santiago photographs a frog. We record all the species of frogs living with Darwin's frogs, and we swab individuals of these other species for the BD fungus. This is an interesting job. El Valle, a national park in the bowl of an inactive volcano in Panama, is home to the endangered golden frog. Scientists know of no way to rid the environment of BD, but we can move frogs to safety, with the hope that someday they or their descendants can go home. Just such a rescue was performed in 2006. Scientists predicted that BD would reach El Valle in Panama, Central America, soon thereafter. Many species of amphibians, including the endangered golden frog, lived there. The scientists traveled to El Valle shortly before the fungus arrived. They collected 600 frogs of 35 species and flew them back to the Zoo Atlanta and the Atlanta Botanical Garden in Georgia. Many of these frogs are breeding in captivity. If El Valle becomes BD-free in the future, descendants of the original frogs will be returned. BD killed many frogs that remained in El Valle. If the fungus begins to wipe out Darwin's frogs, a similar rescue could be attempted in Chile. The Atlanta Botanical Garden and the National Zoo of Chile have built a facility at the zoo to house rescued frogs. If it comes to that point. Golden frogs, found only in Panama, are critically endangered because of habitat destruction, specimen overcollecting, and exposure to BD. Legend has it that anyone who finds one of these frogs will be rewarded with happiness and good luck. Let's hope that the frogs themselves will have good fortune to survive. For now, until the facility is needed to house rescued frogs, terraria there provide a home to healthy Darwin frogs. After males start peeping, females lay eggs. Then males brood tadpoles and baby frogs hop out of their fathers' mouths. If BD wipes out Darwin frogs in the wild, this captive population will serve as a safeguard against extinction. Another captive breeding program for Darwin's frogs has been established at the University of Concepcion in Chile. All these efforts help give Darwin frogs a better chance of surviving. Probing the mystery of Darwin's frogs has involved scientists from Europe, South America, and North America. These researchers have made their discoveries about Darwin frogs using various methods. They include examination and dissection of preserved specimens, captive breeding, laboratory experiments, field observations, and analysis of skin swabs. The story of the survival of Darwin frogs begins a new chapter. The answer to one question sparks many new questions. That is how science works. Meanwhile, back in the Chilean forest, male Darwin frogs continue to burp up tiny babies. The babies wriggle into the wet moss, safe at the moment from choucaus, BD, and people. In parts of South America, you might hear, "Viva ranitas de Darwin." Long live Darwin frogs. Although scientists have learned much about Darwin frogs, there are many more mysteries yet to be unraveled about these unique animals. The amphibian facility at the National Zoo in Santiago, Chile, is prepared to house rescued frogs if BD causes die offs.